The US Department of Justice has released more documents relating to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. 3 million pages, 180,000 images and 2,000 videos were released 6 weeks after the department's mandated deadline for all files to be made public. Information identifying victims or anything that could jeopardise an active investigation has been redacted.
Our North America correspondent Cayman Koch has been covering this story for us. Cayman, what can you tell us about this latest tranche of files that have been released?
Well, this is by far the largest information dump. The previous information releases pale in comparison. And we also got the indication from the Department of Justice that this will be the last major release of documents, notably weeks after the legal deadline they were supposed to release all of them. And even though there's 3 million pages that have been released today, we learnt from the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, that they've identified 6 million records in relation. So already Democrats and survivors have been critical as to why millions of documents are being withheld from the public. Now, Todd Blanche said many documents won't be made public to protect the identities of survivors and to not jeopardise any active investigations. We are seeing from this big release now that there are thousands of mentions of prominent individuals, including President Bill Clinton, President Donald Trump, Bill Gates. Now, just appearing in these files does not imply any wrongdoing, and all of the previous I've just mentioned have outwardly said that they deny any wrongdoing associated with the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. One thing we are seeing in these documents, though, are 302 memos, and what they are is essentially the interview notes with witnesses, victims and survivors with the FBI. And the survivors that I've spoken to said that they've been looking out for their own 302s in the previous batches of information because they know that they exist, where they've detailed their abuse and allegations, and they hadn't seen them, and they feel that obviously they've provided this information to authorities and they felt not much had been done with it. It appears that we are seeing several of those 302s be released, although some are extremely redacted. One appears to include Virginia Giuffre's 302. She was one of the most outspoken victims of Epstein's abuse. She died last year. And in this document, she outlines that abuse from a redacted individual, which appears to be Jeffrey Epstein. So it appears some of these redactions either could be unnecessary or overcautious from the Department of Justice. But here is the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, justifying some of the redactions that we're seeing.
I want to talk for just a moment about the redactions that will be obvious to anyone who reviews the materials that we just produced today. In addition to the documentary redactions, which includes personal identifying information, victim information, and other privileges, there is extensive redactions to images and videos. To protect victims, we redacted every woman depicted in any image or video, with the exception of Ms. Maxwell.
And Cayman, it's been quite difficult, hasn't it, for the White House to dodge questions about what's actually in the files?
Well, in a way, this is very much an own goal from the Trump administration, with many around him who campaigned on this issue and on transparency. And now, publicly knowing that there are millions of documents that the Department of Justice has but is not releasing, that won't satisfy many people who voted for the Trump administration, who were skeptical about information being withheld from the public to protect powerful individuals. Whether or not that is true, which Todd Blanche says that is not the case. But nevertheless, we now know that there are so many documents that aren't being released. And a part of that expectation from the public was set up by the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who notably didn't deliver the news today. In the first weeks of Trump's second term, she said in an interview, "I have the Epstein files on my desk." Then she held a media event with influencers, giving them all a binder saying Epstein files phase 1. When there's a phase 1, you expect there to be a phase 2. Months later, the DOJ came out with a statement, a memo saying essentially they've looked into the matter, no more files will be released. That's the end of discussion. That outraged many people across the aisle, and that's when we saw Congress act to implement this legislation. And when it went through Congress, Everyone supported it bar one individual. So it was bipartisan, near unanimous support to want to be seen as standing up for transparency and not being associated with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, that forced the Department of Justice to release all of these files that we've been seeing in the past weeks, albeit often quite late and past the legal deadline. But Todd Blanche has said that no one has been telling them how to release them. They haven't been ordered to protect anyone or protect the president. Here's what he had to say.
My team has certain communications with the White House. Let me just be clear. They had nothing to do with this review. They had no oversight over this review. They did not tell this department how to do our review, what to look for, what to redact, what to not redact.
Now, this issue has dogged the White House all of last year. It's clear it won't go away. It's clear the information that's been released today does not satisfy Democrats and survivors. And it's also clear that this will continue in the news cycle regardless, because Donald Trump has ordered an investigation into Democrats linked with Jeffrey Epstein. So more information and more news around this issue will continue throughout Trump's second term.
Caitlin Gock there reporting for us from Washington. Thank you.
And let's get more on that story, because documents detailing the relationship between Jeffrey Epstein and former Prince Andrew have also been dropped in the latest files. Europe correspondent Catherine Diss filed this report.
Well, in this latest tranche of documents, there is more evidence pointing to the closeness of the relationship between the former Prince Andrew and the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Now, there are a lot of documents relating to their communications in 2010. I'm going to take you through some of those now. In one email exchange in June 2010 between the then Prince Andrew and Epstein, they talk about meeting up with beautiful Russians. Epstein writes about one woman in particular, describing her as a great friend who's very pretty and his future ex-wife. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor responded saying he's emailed her but not yet received a reply. Epstein then responds with her phone number. Then in August, Epstein told the then Prince Andrew he had a friend who he thought he might enjoy having dinner with, and disclosed the dates she'd be in London. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor replied saying he would be delighted to see her and said to pass on his contact details to get in touch. Epstein described her as a beautiful 26-year-old trustworthy Russian and confirmed he'd passed on his email. Then in September, the then Prince invited Epstein to dinner at Buckingham Palace and promised lots of privacy. The former Prince claimed to have cut off ties and communications with Jeffrey Epstein in 2010, but these files released today show more evidence that communications were ongoing in 2011. There are emails from February of that year discussing the bad press that they have been receiving and each other checking in to see if they're going okay. They also talk about paying somebody, but we don't know who. They discuss ensuring that it doesn't get paid directly and that it contains some form of general release. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was stripped of his royal titles in October by King Charles. That was made official when it was published in the Gazette. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has continued to maintain his innocence despite the allegations of sexual misconduct linked to Jeffrey Epstein, and despite the fact that he settled a civil lawsuit with his main accuser, the late Virginia Giuffre, in 2022 without any admission of liability.